Good morning everyone, Dr. Sloan and any YouTubers that might come across this video. My name is Victoria Taylor and this is my AV presentation on the coordinated management of meaning. So let's just first start with what it is. So it's just a view of what communication is. They see it as a process. So this means that it is just based in that it's a form of how something's done. It's just a multiple steps that communication kind of goes through. But they also recognize that communication is huge. So there's several different perspectives of all the different ways that we kind of converse and communicate with each other. So this was also created by W. Barnett Pierce and Vernon Cronin, and I learned all about this in our textbook, Griffin 2008. So the first claim, communication perspective. This is so interesting. In Griffin 2008, we learned about we do not find our social roles. We create them. So these aren't things that we're just stumbling into. I think a lot of times there's conversation about like, oh, you need to find your community, you need to find your people, but if you look at it as that we create the world around us, that we build that, then it just really changes kind of how you view things. So I find that really interesting. Second claim is stories. So first there are stories told, and then after that there are stories lived. What's so interesting about this is that within stories told, these are what we use to make meaning. This is just the different things we say and that we tell to kind of explain why things are the way they are, why something happened. And then this is very different from the other parts of stories lived. In Griffin 2008, they really express that you need to understand that the stories we tell and the stories we live are not the same one, for a lot of different reasons. Part of it is that within the stories we live, we're just really going into it with having to keep others into account because people change things, whereas the story we tell, we control the whole process. So if we're just telling someone a story and they, whereas stories lived, we don't know what other people are going to do. You can know someone for your entire life and then they can totally surprise you with how they express themselves or how they react. So those are kind of the difference between the stories told and the stories lived. The next is claim 3, which is what we make. So as we learned a few points ago, since our social worlds are created by us, we make them what we want them to be. A lot of times this is a really confusing thing for people because we just see it as kind of that like, oh, well, these are just the people around us, but we're in control. Within this theory, they kind of believe that we need to decide what we want and we need to make that happen. The next one is claim 4, which is for better outcomes. And basically this kind of says like this is a pattern that we have to learn to get right. And if you keep growing and trying and struggling through to find a good pattern, then you really have a lot of hope. Caring, compassion, love, and grace are 4 of the things that they just really believe that you need to invest into, and that these are the kind of things that can change things for you and can really create a whole new world. So that is part of Griffin 2008 as well. So I found this to be another really interesting point because I think we forget about that a lot of times. That we have to really work for relationships and for our social worlds. So the last point was I want to talk about my life application and what this reminded me of and made me think about everything. So I just thought about my social life. One of the things they talk about in their textbook and within this theory of coordinated management of meaning is that a lot of times we have these ideals of like what our community should look like. And so we chase after those so hard that we actually make it worse. And I have definitely seen myself do this. I had like an ideal in my head of like the kind of friend and community that I wanted that just wasn't realistic. And the more I pushed into that, the worse it became because it was just kind of led to tension and difficulty and just disappointment. But what's really cool is kind of working through that and being like, hey, I'm creating this world around me. I'm creating this group of people that I want to be my community. And so because of that, and just coming to peace with that's going to look like whatever it's going to look like can be a really freeing thing. Basically, you have to make the most of every situation. A lot of times we don't know how life is going to go. We might have how we think things are going to happen, but it just doesn't go the way that we've always expected it to. And that's okay. That's actually really good and it's exciting. So we just have to learn to make the most of whatever situation we've been given, continue to tell our story, pour into our relationships, and some amazing things can happen. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.